We are clearly at an inflection point for humanity. And there is a lot of stress, a lot of crisis around us. We have virus, we have riots, we have food supply issues, environmental problems, just all kinds of problems. And our response, humanity's response in general, is control, control, control. We're going to fight a war on the virus. We're going to control the virus. We're going to spray it. We're going to eliminate it. We're going to vaccinate it out of existence. We're going to control our food supply. We're going to control people. We're going to control everything. We're going to control all our inputs into the environment. We're going to control every way that we interact with it. Control, control, control. And this is ultimately what will lead to our extinction, really. So nature will exist infinitely because it has infinite degrees of freedom. Because it does not control under most circumstances. So the complexity of nature happens because there's always, everything is tied together in a web. There's 15 different ways to get to one thing. There's, 9 different ways to make this thing happen. There's so much, overlap and options and all these things, which is why you can always have a nuanced response to anything that's just right. And I say this over and over again, but Adrian Bejan defines life, the physicist, he defines life as movement with the freedom to change. Freedom is an integral part of that definition. You take that away and you don't have life. You take away movement, you don't have life. You take away freedom, you don't have life. And yet, the human's response to everything that goes wrong is control. Control is remove all the freedoms, control the variables, put one thing in front of my face so I can control it, and that's it. And there is a time and a place for controlling. And it happens in 2 ways. One is, when we flip into instinct, when we get scared and flip into instinct, you tend to, freeze or run or control things. And that can get you, it can help you to survive in the moment very temporarily. But if you maintain that control over a long period of time, your lifespan becomes very short because you lose your degrees of freedom. The other way that can happen is when you intentionally control things from a grounded place, and you can either make that temporary or long term. But it's the same thing. If you don't go back to freedom, then life will become very short, the overall lifespan. It may work in the moment. So let's just look at some examples. If you cut an artery, you immediately apply control, which is a tourniquet, right? So you put on the control to stop the bleeding. And then you can do other things to take care of the problem, and then you must remove the tourniquet. You must remove the control and go back to, freedom of the blood flowing around the body properly. And as long as you do that, it's fine. So in that case, the control is done in service to freedom, ultimately. And another scenario, if you were being chased by a lion, we'd like to use that as the stress example, right? Which never happens anymore. If you're being chased by a lion, your body will implement controls instantly. It will shunt blood away from digestion, away from your immune system, even away from your brain, which requires a lot of energy, and put it into the extremities. Sorry, my connection's really bad, but into places where you can help you to run and to get away. And that's a very temporary measure. So when you're out of the situation, then your body removes those controls and allows, the blood and the energy and everything to flow to all the places that it needs to flow in the moment for whatever is going on. So that is temporary. And that works really well. what happens outside of nature and outside of the body, what happens when the brain tries to implement controls, we do something differently. So I'm going to move this a little bit. The reason we feel a need for control ever is because we got knocked off balance by something and couldn't regain our balance. So anything that you encounter, any scenario, even a table sitting there will momentarily knock you off balance a little bit. You're like, whoa, there's a table there. And then you regain your balance and you go around the table, right? So you just adjust your movement to deal with it. But there was just a momentary little bit of being knocked off balance. So everything that we encounter does that. Now, bigger things knock off of balance a lot more. Crises can knock us off balance a lot. And when you get knocked off balance and you don't have the grounding and the flexibility to regain your balance and incorporate whatever it was that knocked you off balance, now you've lost your sense of self in relation to other, what I call socerto, sense of self in relation to other. So you've lost that connection. You don't know who you are, and you don't know who you are in relation to the other thing. That is very, very scary. It feels like falling because you're not connected. And when that happens, then you reach externally in a power play. You reach for something that gives you feedback that you still exist and you're still related. So you will yell, you will apply rules, you will use physical force, you will do something to get a response externally that tells your body through the sense, through sight and hearing and whatever, that you still exist and there's still a connection to you because you've lost your own internal sense of it. So that's really the root of everything bad that we do for ourselves and for others, is that loss of sense of self in relation to other, loss of socerto. So when we lose that, we grab for control. We have just got to get control. We got to do something. And that control that we do in those scenarios, we love to make that permanent. Like that loss of sense of self is so disturbing. Sense of self in relation to others is so disturbing. We say we're going to apply a control forever. We're going to make it a rule. We're going to make it a law. We're going to expand on it, right? And that takes away the degrees of freedom that you normally have. So when you do that, you have to bloody well hope that the next crisis that comes up or anything that happens is exactly identical to the previous one, because you don't have any nuanced ways of dealing with it. You have to do just what you did before because you controlled everything. You controlled all the variables. And this, companies literally regulate themselves out of existence by doing exactly that sort of thing. Every time there's an issue, every time somebody does something wrong or somebody makes a mistake or product was lost or quality was hurt, the inclination is to make a rule. And they end up with so many rules they can't even function anymore. They have no movement with the freedom to change. It's all gone, and they literally regulate. And the human race right now is literally about to control itself out of existence as well. We'll control ourselves into extinction. A terrible connection. Sorry, we can't go around controlling or thinking we control every variable related to human life. We can't control viruses. There's billions of them in the room that you're sitting in. They've been around since long before humans, will be around long after us. They're in space. They're everywhere. And you know what? They do good things. It's our interpretation of what's happening with a virus that causes a problem, and our reaction to it and the scenarios that we set up. But we can't control that. It's insane. We can't do that. We can't control the bacteria. We can't control nature. We can't control hardly anything that we think that we can control. All we can do is remove our degrees of freedom and make ourselves stuck. So this is like, when we do this, it's like we have a problem, let's put on a tourniquet, and I know. So to make sure that I never end up bleeding like that again, let's just put tourniquets on all our limbs all the time. And sure enough, you won't ever bleed like that again. But you also won't be alive to bleed because you stop the natural flow of blood. So we're like applying tourniquets everywhere and trying to make that the future of humanity so we're safe. And it's the same thing like if we were being chased by the lion. What we're doing right now is shunting energy from all different kinds, taking it from all different places and shunting it all into one or two things. And so, we have one or two food sources, one or two supply chains, one or two ways of treating people, right? We put it all into that. Not only do we do it once, it completely screws you up the first time around, but then we try and make it permanent. So every other scenario, which is by definition going to be a little bit different, now has to follow those same rules. So this inclination to this desire that the fearful mind has to put in place controls, and not just temporarily, but permanently, is very, very, very bad for us. And it is something, the mind is not bad. The disconnected mind is fearful. And in a state of fear, we believe we have to control. When we get knocked off balance and can't regain it, we go into instinct. Instinct is thinking, and thinking says, what can I control? Right? I can't handle a million variables. It's not possible. What can I control? Because your body probably can, but your brain, it can't handle it consciously. So that only happens when we've lost our grounding, lost our sense of self in relation to other, when we've lost our social, then the brain is not working in service to us anymore. And the controls are not working in service to freedom. They become against freedom. In nature, by design, controls work in service to freedom. But life is freedom. The direction of life is always towards more degrees of freedom. And in order to stop doing things to humanity that take away our degrees of freedom so that we cannot properly respond to things because we are locked into one way, which most of the time is even wrong because it was a way that we chose from a state of fear. We weren't even thinking properly when we did it. But then we lock ourselves into it. The way to get out of that is we shouldn't ever, 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 ever make or allow others to make rules or laws or decrees or any of those things when we haven't first gone, wait a minute, are we grounded? Do we know individually, do you know who you are, right? As a race or a community or a nation or a school system or a family, as a unit, do you know who you are? Do you know your place? Does humanity know its place in nature? Because we are a part of nature. We are not above nature. That's what gets us into these problems in the first place. We're a part of nature. Nature does have rules, but only a very, very few of them. And the construct a law, the flow, the design of things in order to flow ever greater amounts of energy with more ease is one of them. And the laws of thermodynamics are those, but there's a handful of laws in nature, and the rest is about freedom. One of the laws in nature is you need to maximize the flow and the freedom for greatest longevity. The higher the complexity, the higher the degrees of freedom, the longer the longevity of the system. And an individual person is a system still, and the human race is a system. Everything is a system. So we must never, ever, ever, ever make or allow others to make rules and laws and decrees and edicts and constraints when we haven't first verified that we're grounded. The beautiful thing about humanity is when you look at humanity, when you look at nature, when you look at life through the eyes of the energetics of behavior, the transfer of energy that happens, how energy moves and where it moves and what's causing it to move. The role of humanity in nature is very, very beautiful. What distinguishes humans, in that context, what distinguishes humans from other animals is the fact that we can choose to stay grounded. When we get knocked off balance, we don't have to go to instinct. We can say, wow, that really knocks me off balance. I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to supple and ground and collect and figure it out. We get to make that choice. That's what differentiates the human. And in my opinion, that's why other animals connect with us. Now, it's not because we're the top predator. It's not because we will. That doesn't make animals get curious about us and go, oh, they're interesting. I think I'll watch them and I'll check them out and I'll join with them. No, that's not how it works. What they're joining with is our capacity to choose to stay grounded. Because when they join with us, they benefit from that. They get some of that same grounding through us, and it also increases their capacity to live. And the other thing that humans bring is we are integrators. We can integrate so much information because we can create concepts. And concepts allow us to take away the details and see the root and integrate across, worlds, across people, across environments, across nations, across states, across oceans. We can integrate all over. So we're the single greatest integrators on the planet. And we're here to be the great integrators who can stay grounded. And everything we're doing right now in this inflection point, everything that the people in power are doing right now in this inflection point is the opposite of that. It's the opposite of why humanity is here. They're disintegrating. They're removing the degrees of freedom. They're implementing controls. They're dissecting and controlling instead of integrating and grounding. This has to stop. And the insanity of thinking that we can actually survive by controlling things is beyond description. If you look, I'm sitting out here, there's butterflies all around me. If anyone wants to know where the butterflies come to my farm, they're here. They're all around me. And you can watch an egg on a milkweed stay there just the right amount of time until just the right amount of things have happened energetically inside, so that the energy exists in its various forms for the next phase, where a caterpillar emerges out of that egg. And it begins to eat. It eats and eats and eats until it has grown to the right point and accumulated the energy and the grounding and the fuel and everything that it needs exactly. It's kind of a quorum sensing. When it's accumulated everything it needs for the next phase, then this phase no longer serves it. And then it crawls off and it spends like a day building a little button of silk to hang for. And it hangs and it becomes a jade. Sorry for the connection. Every caterpillar does the same thing, creates the same jade, hangs there. And at just the right moment, it sheds off its final skin and becomes a beautiful green jewel, a chrysalis with little gold dots hanging there for 10 to 14 days as it's changing and developing, and the transfers of energy are happening in there, the chemistry, everything else is going on. And at the moment when that chrysalis no longer serves that energy, breaks out of that and becomes a butterfly. And it flies off as this beautiful, free creature to repeat that cycle again. And all of that happens without any rules put in place. All of that happens because nature has already set up all the energetic systems, all the flow of energy, all the triggers that change the energy from this flow to that flow, you know, the law, the constructal law and the thermodynamics and all those things already exist for those transfers of energy to happen. And there's nothing we can do about it. We can't help that cat. With billions of viruses, like right here with me, right here, we think that we can control these and control our health and control what's going to happen and control. We think that we can control the future and control our health, which we don't even understand, and control our food and the environment and everything else, and the way we interact with it when we understand almost none of the variables. We can't even help a caterpillar to hatch, and we shouldn't. So what the hell are we doing? We're going to regulate ourselves into extinction. We must stop. We need to never, I'm going to say it the last time, never, ever, 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 ever make or allow others to make rules, regulations, edicts, and controls without first saying, are we grounded? Do we know who we are? If you're an individual in a corporation, do you know who you are as an individual? Does the corporation know who they are? If you're a member of the human race and we're looking globally, does humanity know who it is? Does it know its role in nature? Look at that first before we take any other actions. Stop this insanity of control, 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 and regain our grounding. The only reason we ever reach for permanent controls, small little temporary things can be done in service to freedom, but they are not typically done by the mind in service. Nature does that and the body does that. The only way the mind can truly do that temporarily is to be fully grounded. Otherwise it stays in fear and wants permanent control, which is exactly what you're seeing going on right now. The people seeking control, they cannot maintain their sense of self in relation to other free people, right? That scares the crap out of them when people are free. It's not us they care about, it's them, right? And they only believe that humanity can survive by being controlled, which is completely insane, but they believe that because they're living in a fear state. And people who are almost asking to be controlled have the same problem. They have not regained their sense, their socer tool, their sense of self in relation to other. They got knocked off balance and they have not regained it, and they want someone to tell them what to do, so they're not responsible. So we must regain our sense of self in relation to other. There's no sense of self separate from other. Who are you and who is humanity in relation to life, to all of life, to nature, to everything around us? That has to be the foundation for every step we take forward now. And when we do that, humanity can see not just a blossoming of humanity beyond anything we've ever seen before, but a blossoming of nature, because our role in nature is to provide that grounding. We are the only ones who can do that. We're the only ones who can choose to get grounded in a crisis situation. And when we choose to provide that grounding, not just for us, but for everything, to be the grounding, and allow all the integration to happen, the complexity, the degrees of freedom, we can see a flourishing like we have never, ever, ever seen before. And that's the choice we are brought to right now. Right now, we are either going to control ourselves into extinction, or we're going to create a blooming and a blossoming of life like the earth has never seen before. And that choice is being forced upon us, and we need to pick a side. And then we need to learn how to be beautiful. Beauty is the flow. Beauty is the experience of a sudden release of energy that was previously stuck. It's the flow of energy. Beauty is what you get when you choose to ground, because now the energy can flow. So in beauty, we will bring about the most magnificent change ever imaginable, even imaginable, for humanity and the earth. Stay grounded, watch the butterflies, and don't let people take away our freedom. Thank you.